Hello, we're going to watch a video about South Korea, and the video is South Korea is over. I believe this is a reference to the demographic collapse that South Korea is going through, and it seems to be very concerning, the situation. And before we start the video, I will have a look at the data and see what the data says, because apparently this is one thing that seems to be convincing most people that we're going through a type of demographic collapse, and South Korea seems to be our future. What's likely to happen? Because replacement rate is roughly, from what we're told, is 2.1, which means two parents have to have two children, and this is way below. Apparently, South Korea is the worst country in terms of demographic collapse, the effects it's having on the public, levels of isolation, depression, all the effects that come with it. Diet, I think there was a statistic somewhere saying above 3/4 of South Korea is about to go extinct, as in all these small villages that have kind of been there for thousands of years are likely to go extinct in the next couple of generations. So, yeah. This is, anyway, we'll go to the first one. This is roughly South Korea's model. I had to look this up. And this was one of the first things that ever proved to me that more attention had to be displayed with that. I mean, if you were to look at this here, I mean, it doesn't take much of a genius to see that what we have here is, I mean, it's like an arrow pointing down, isn't it? The inverted pyramid, which apparently they're only about 20 to 30 years away from. So once you reach the inverted pyramid, when it looks like a complete inverted pyramid, that's when your country is over. That's when you've got too many old people to, what China calls the 4-2-1 problem, which is when you've got 4 grandparents to 2 parents to 1 child. And eventually, you'll have so few workers in and too many dependencies in your economy that eventually everything will just collapse because there's too few people paying into the pension system and the, welfare system that disabled people rely on, etc. So yeah, not a great future for South Korea. But before we watch the video, I just want to have a look at a bit of data, just to kind of rate the points they're going to be making, and there's going to be a few things they're going to be looking for. So this is South Korea's population pyramid. As you can see, it's kind of a stage 1 triangle. I'm going to try and keep it more steady. And yeah, it's just getting worse and worse and worse by the year. Even Elon Musk has talked about it, which is giving a lot of credence to it. But yeah, so this is the birth rates, bong, and then the death rates, so that's not good. But it seems 90% of the decline seems to be from the live births. That live births is how many people are born per year, it appears. So over here, where is it? 1960, you essentially had every South Korean woman having over 6 children per woman. And overall, from 1960, which is when they had their peak live births, there's only been a decline. So essentially, there's been like 1960, death rates are going up, growth rates are going down. How long did that take? So where is it? It's 1960. And 1983 was when they were below replacement. So that's only 23 years, isn't it? Yeah. So it took them 23 years to go from their peak, 6+ to below replacement in just 23 years. That is really, really quick. Normally it takes about 60 to 85 years to get to your peak, to your below replacement, but big family countries or anything 4 or more children, which I think is very rare now. You don't see it. It didn't take it long, did it? So from it to go from a big family to a small family, it took them from a peak, let's say 1960 to so it took them 14 years to go from big family to below big family, and from big family to below replacement. Doesn't take long, does it, for a society to... Anyway, from 1983 onwards, they were below replacement, and they've just been shrinking. Hang on, where's their peak? 1,080,000 people, essentially, was their peak. How many births they had in 1 year. And there's been a 1960 till now, there's been a 64-year decline in live births. That's more or less like an 80% reduction. And yeah, I mean, you can't run a society of 0.2 or even 0.5, even if that is a mini improvement. And by the way, that's not an improvement, 0.2 to 0.5, because if you look at the model itself, you can see kind of these edges here. It goes up, down, up, down, up, down. So there's got to be an up period and then a down period again. So people are saying, yay, there's an improvement in South Korea. It's not. It will definitely get worse before it gets better. Yeah, this is crazy. This is the liquidation of a country. In 20 years' time, it'll essentially be the functional extinction of South Korea. Even calling them a country at that point would just be laughable. So imagine you're born in South Korea today, and by the time you turn 30, there's essentially no pension, no communities. People having siblings will probably be a rarity. I don't know what the marriage rates are, but I think they're much better than what the West is. And the only people that are going to be left, if you believe in what Eric Kaufman is saying in his book, Shall the Religious Inherit the Earth, which is, if liberals and communists and socialists, social democrats, democratic socialists, Greens, liberals, liberal conservatives, conservative liberals, etc., 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 if super very conservative people are the only ones having kids, then it begs the question, who's going to be left? Well, the only people who are going to be left are the people having kids. And the people who are most likely going to be having kids will be the very conservative people from whatever tradition they're a part of. So they won't just be religious people. They'll be like very strict, like Amish people or something. Don't know how to feel about that, but, you can't argue with the data. It's just a permanent collapse. And if you look at the world as well, that's even worse. Maybe I'll get to that another day. But yeah, and of course, life expectancy has gone up and up and up. That's fine. But eventually, the proportion of people who belong to 65 plus, 60 plus, 70 plus even. So you'll be an aging society to an aged society, then to a super aged society. Yeah. So you got all that to look forward to, the collapse of your society. All right, so we've had a look at look at that. I wonder if there's anything that... Yeah, 60 years that took. So imagine, the South Koreans have kind of been there for... people have lived in Korea for about 10,000 years, maybe. And... in 60 years, they've just managed to collapse it. So within less than one lifetime, they've managed to collapse South Korea. So if you're born in South Korea today, there'll be empty streets, there'll be more homes than nurseries. Just some of the videos I've seen, some of these... Japan has it. Surprisingly, it's the only other country that just has it as bad. And we've got all this to look forward to in the West, in Britain, America, France... The only lucky thing for the West is for once another country got there first for whatever reason. We're still trying to work out why is South Korea collapsing so quickly and why is some countries doing quite well. I think there's only 2 countries to my mind that are actually got a stable fertility rate that isn't collapsing from its peak. And that's Israel and Kazakhstan. For some reason. Nobody knows why. They just are. But not enough to make a worldwide difference. And some people are saying that even this might be temporary. So even the countries that do exist, well, as countries begin to urbanize, they should begin to shrink because, congested urban areas, extreme urbanized areas like Tokyo, are more likely to decline than, say, rural areas or suburban areas. So, yeah. All right. Shall we play this depressing video? I mean, for me, I remember watching this a couple of years back, and I remember this being one of the most depressing sights I think I've ever seen. And I think I was watching a few videos from Japan and South Korea, and you go to some villages in Japan, it's like a ghost town. There's like 3 or 4 old people, and they're like, it's like the last generation to live there. Some of these villages have been there since Japan's founding, and it's absolutely abominable that it's happening. I understand, like, it's part of the process, urbanization, suburbanization, deruralization of these places is not great, but it is what it is. So, all right, let's watch this depressing video, shall we? I'll pause if there's anything else to add. If not, we'll just continue.
This sounds brutal, but South Korea will soon start melting on all fronts, demographically, economically, socially, culturally, and militarily. Because for decades, the country has been experiencing a fertility crisis unprecedented in human history, and we've probably reached a point of no return. By 2060, the South Korea we know and love today will no longer...
See, it's interesting that he actually says there's a point of no return, as in, there's a general kind of sense that some people, if they're being optimistic, they said, no, South Korea's got another 30, 40 years before it turns it around. But this video has come out and said, no, it's over. I think this is the most maximalist, black-pilled type of view you can take, the most nihilistic view that you can take, which is it's over. There's nothing more we can do. We've tried to pay our citizens to have kids, not working. So, I don't know. It's like, what do you do? The vibrancy of the country will eventually fade. You won't be able to get people in the army, etc. So...
exist. What will the collapse look like, and why is it now almost impossible to stop? The real population bomb. To have a stable population, you need a fertility rate of about 2.1 children per woman. In the 1950s, South Koreans used to have 6 children on average. In the 1980s, the rate fell below 2. And in 2023, it was 0.72 kids per woman, the lowest ever recorded in history. In Seoul, fertility is even lower, around 0.55. On average, about
0.55. So, if you have a 1 fertility rate or birth rate, normally that is so imagine you've got grandparents, right? And they only have 1 kid, and then they only have 1 kid. Well, that means your country is essentially halving every generation. Who's going to be paying for these pensions? So South Korea started their pension in the 1980s, I think it was, and it's likely to go bust somewhere in the 2060s. So it's the 2025 now. So that means by the time you've turned 30, there is no pension. It's like, you can't run a society this way. I think even Japan's prime minister, which is... It's much more further along than South Korea, but South Korea is catching up real quick. It's like, Japan's gone through this doom spiral, and South Korea's just run straight ahead and just said, wait for me. It's like whatever Japan's gone through, and Japan's just put it on fast forward. So yeah. It's weird talking about this, the end of countries, the end of societies, the end of civilizations. Because Japan is essentially a civilizational state. It is its own civilization, essentially. Just because it's been so isolated. It has had a few influences from China, etc. But there's nothing like Shintoism. And it'll be a shame to lose that from the world. And, as a conservative, I like conserving all these, the vibrancy of humanity, which I think is deeply important. And it would be a shame, like, if, the world I kind of grew up in, where there was like Shinto Japan and Confucianist China, and you had Hinduism in India, and everywhere will be secularizing, which ain't a bad thing, but the next generation will not have the options of joining these kind of communities, if there's any sense of community in the future, of course, like we had. So yeah, I mean, any of us can go through a spiritual retreat in India or China or wherever, Japan. But I realise that the next generation just won't have that. You can't run a country off 0.5, so that's 4 times lower than the replacement level. So that means so imagine that you'll have 4 old people per 1 worker within 1 generation. So even if you have a pension system, it'll essentially collapse within, I don't know, how long does a person work for? So let's say you start work at 18 and you retire at 60, 65. You're essentially working for about 55, 57 years. Sorry, not 55. Yeah, so let's say you've got half a century of work in you. So that means a pension system can only last about 50 years. So within 1 generation, 2 generation, 3. So imagine our generation has a pension. Our grandkids won't. I can't, even now, even where I'm from, I can't see my kids getting a pension. I can't see my grandkids getting a pension. And while I am conservative, and I will be, these are very strange times, very, very strange times. But we live in the society we live in the times we live, and you can't kind of choose what kind of times you live in. And if we're living in the humanity's decline, then we are. Actually, humanity's live birth rate has been declining since 2012. So I guess that movie was correct. That 2012 wasn't the end of the world, but it was the beginning of the end because of humanity's gradual decline, which is fantastic. All that to look forward to.
About half of the women here won't have any kids, and the other half just 1. What do these numbers actually mean in the real world? If fertility stays as it is, then 100 South Koreans will have 36 kids. When they grow up, they will have 13 kids, who will then have 5. Within 4 generations...
I remember my grandmother, and it's crazy to think, like, her generation would have left us for something like this, but yet we're leaving our grandkids, or maybe even our kids, Actually, maybe even us. I'm a millennial, right? So I'll see all of this happen within my lifetime. This is crazy. So there'll be 5% of their population, 4 or 5% of their population, within 3 generational transitions. By generational transition, I mean, so if you've got 4 generations, it's 1 generation from generation 1 to generation 2, second generational transition from generation 2 to 3, and then 3 to 4. So 3 generational transitions. So if I have a kid, that's 1 generational transition, even those 2 generations. So from generation point A to point B to point C to point D. This is crazy. And the fact that it's happening so quickly gives society, countries, and very little time to adjust. How can you adjust to such a rapid speed of decline? I don't know.
100 South Koreans will turn into 5. If we look at today's South Korean population pyramid, we see this is pretty real.
95%. I've got to go back to this because there's so much data being shoved in our face. It's just like 95% of your population will be disappearing. Because I remember my great-grandmother, so in her lifetime, she will, because a lot of people do know their great-grandchildren, and as we live older, a lot of people do know their grandkids, so grandkids will be able to see all of this happen. You might not know your great-great-grandmother, but you might know your great-grandmother. There are a lot of people who know their greats, and a lot of people know their grandparents, but very rarely it's great-great. So within one lifetime, because great-grandmothers do know like their great-grandkids, within one lifetime, they will see... So that's only 60 years, from 1960 to now. That's only 65 years. So imagine you're born in 1960, large healthy families, healthy communities, a sense of self. and all of that collapses within one lifetime. Well, actually, it's only half a lifetime at the moment, but yeah, within one lifetime from 1960, let's say you live a little over 100 to 2060. Yeah, so let's say you live to 100, a little over 100, let's say 105. You know, not breaking any records, but you live a little over a century. Okay. You've essentially, within one lifetime, you've seen your entire country go extinct. I almost don't have words for that. That's absolutely crazy.
Generations, 100 South Koreans will turn into 5. If we look at today's South Korean population pyramid, we see this is pretty...
You know, I'll go with that. It's not just the data itself, but it's how quick it's happening. And you can just see like this rhombus kind of forming, like this pyramid and then this inverted pyramid. Because they say once you reach the inverted pyramid, and you can kind of see it here, right? Once the inverted pyramid forms, which I imagine it will, you know, be complete within 30 to 40 years, they say your society is done, but I've never seen it happen this quickly. Japan, it took, you know, a very long time to get there, but South Korea got there within less than one lifetime, which is absolutely crazy.
Pretty real. There's only one 1-year-old for 4 50-year-olds. After 4 decades below the replacement level, the consequences were still largely invisible. Today, South Korea's population is at an all-time high, as are its workforce and its GDP, which is still growing. The demographics hits you like a freight train. You hear it vaguely in the distance, and then it runs you over. South Korea is about to be hit. Let's time travel 35 years into the future, to 2060, and see what the country will look like then. When it comes to demographics, the most commonly used projections are those put together by the UN. They envisage 3 scenarios: low fertility, medium, and high. But in the past, all medium UN projections for South Korea have consistently been too positive. Between
UN have actually been quite famous for getting many things wrong. If you actually look at South America, for example, that's just crashing since 2015 for whatever reason. Nobody seems to know. I mean, if you look at Mexico, Mexico just cratered. Chile is, I think, is now at 1. So they're going to half every generation now, which is amazing. Even Argentina and Brazil, if you actually look at their demographic models, they actually have reached their peak. But it's like South Korea is the future. You do understand that. Like anything South Korea, anything that happens, normally it's whatever happens in the West happens everywhere else. Kind of, there's like a 20 or 30 year cultural lag. But in South Korea now, whatever they go through, whatever Japan goes through, there's like a 20, maybe 10, 20 year cultural lag in the West that is kind of happening to us, but in slow motion. I mean, you know, every single state in America, I think, now is below replacement level. I mean, there are no big family states anymore, but yeah, I think the only thing that's keeping America growing right now is kind of like very conservative, deep South families, like forming very and all that's going to be left of America is like the Amish and a few other very religious groups, you know. Which is, maybe Eric Kaufman's right. Shall the religious inherit the earth because they're the only ones having kids? Maybe. You know, I mean, Marx wasn't exactly a fan of the family. Well, if communists aren't having kids and liberals are kind of wishy-washy about it, yeah, I guess. Yeah, might have them, might not. Conservatives, they see it as an obligation, especially religious conservatives. If you look at the Amish, the more religious they are, the more kids they end up having, so... let's play.
In 2022 and 2023 alone, fertility in South Korea dropped by another 8%. So we're going to use the latest low fertility scenario, which has been the most accurate in the last few years. Keep in mind that we're still talking about projections, and the future is a faraway land. Okay, let's do it. In 2060, South Korea's population pyramid will look like this. The population will have shrunk by 30%. 16 million South Koreans will have disappeared in just 35 years. And it'll be the oldest country in human history. 1 in 2 South Koreans will be over the age of 65. Less than 1 in 10 will be under 25. And only 1 in 100 will be small children. Imagine waking up in a country where the...
I know. You can't have that dependency ratio. You cannot run a society that way where you've kind of got, whatever it's 40, 50% retirement and another. The worker to dependency ratio will be. You can't have 1 worker per 3 retirement people. You just can't run a society that way.
Streets are strangely quiet with no children playing on them. Entire cities have been abandoned. Half of the population is elderly and living either alone or in overcrowded retirement homes, with minority.
I mean, this is already happening in Japan, but South Korea will be getting there quicker. But Japan got there first, but South Korea is getting there quicker. So,
People desperately trying to keep society running. There will be a few major consequences. Economic collapse. In 2023, the breathtaking 40% of South Koreans over 65 live below the poverty line, but in 2060, this number may seem lovely in comparison. Today, South Korea has one of the largest pension funds in the world, worth about $730 billion US, but it's projected to stop growing in the 2040s and be completely depleted by the 2050s. So in 2060, pensions will have to be paid by the working population. Estimates vary, but for a pension...
So just think about it. South Korea started their pension about 1980s, I think, and it's kind of going to end in 2060. So that means, I wonder if that was always the case, that pension systems were just... So within less than one lifetime, the pension system of South Korea has just been destroyed. Let's see, 2060. So, yeah, let's say you're born today in South Korea. By the time you're 35, it's gone. There is no pension system. That's crazy.
System to work, the minimum a society needs is between 2 to 3 workers per retiree, paying for them with their taxes.
See, I didn't actually know this. So you need 2 to 3 workers per one retiree. I think that makes sense, but I think, I don't know. I think you could still get away with 1 worker per one retiree myself.
But even if we assume that all South Koreans over 15 will be working in 2060, the country will have less than 1 worker per senior. Workers will be unable to stem the incredible costs. So not only will poverty among the elderly be common, but a big chunk will be forced to work. Except they may not be able to find jobs because by 2060, the South Korean economy may have collapsed. Broadly speaking, the size of an economy is linked to the size.
You know, it's kind of interesting because you need high productivity within your economy in this scenario, in this kind of disastrous worst case scenario. But it's happening, so it's the inevitable case scenario, isn't it? 4 times the capital will essentially be a retirement city within 30 years, 20 years, 40. But well, this video is making the case that it's already over. I'm a bit more optimistic. I would say they've got another 20, 30 years to fix it, and then South Korea's over. Or even 40 at a max, at a push, but, you know. Maybe if I looked at the data, it'd be a bit more pessimistic than I'm kind of hoping it will be, but it's not a great situation for anybody. And the only people in South Korea that will be having kids will be the super conservative, super religious kind of people, and those that aren't part of the, you know, the operating system of South Korea right now.
Its workforce. To have a big economy, you need a lot of workers to produce a lot of things and a lot more people to buy them. Today, South Korea has about 37 million people of working age, generating a GDP of about $1.7 trillion US. But by 2060, its workforce will have shrunk to less than half, to about 17 million. Of course, technological progress means that productivity will be higher, and each individual will probably produce more than today. But even if productivity keeps growing at the same rate or more than we've seen in the last decade, South Korea's GDP could peak in the 2040s. In other words, South Korea will enter a permanent economic recession. There are more optimistic projections that see the recession begin as late as 2050, but they're based on the medium UN demographic scenario, and there are no signs that we're heading there. Another factor in the economy is science, technology, and innovation, areas in which big leaps are typically made by young adults and the middle-aged. Young people have fresh ideas that contribute to the wealth of society. Significantly fewer people working also means way less tax for the government, which will be practically in a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, having to provide for half the population that are seniors, on the other, seeing its income diminish. It will be forced to shut down or cut essential services like hospitals or social benefits. Since infrastructure only works at scale, smaller communities may be abandoned as the country contracts into its metropolitan areas. And of course, there won't be enough money to invest in the future.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. You're going to end up with towns, small town, basically big, shall we say these super cities, basically cities with extreme density cities, not just cities with high density, but extremely high density. You're going to end up with like one of these hive cities because cities are going to be overrun. Every other town, small village, even small cities, even Seoul itself. Because I mean, if it's 4 people on top and then 1, so they've got not just what the China calls a 4-2-1 problem, which is if your fertility rate is 0.7, but you'll end up with a 16-4-1 problem, where you've got 16 retirees, then 4 people just beneath that, and then 1 kid to replace like the work. It's a Ponzi scheme. And of course, the pensioners are going to keep voting for what's in their self-interest. So it's just going to be the complete collapse of society. I don't know what's going to happen. It's just an immigration can't be the answer because every other country is going through it too. So I have no idea. It's this is the number one problem for a lot of the conservative movement, and a lot of people within the conservative movement has been talking about it for a long time. the answers have kind of been, there's been honest attempts made at trying to find what is the solution. Is it cultural? Is it a bit economic? Is it a bit of both? I'd say it is a bit of both. I think you've got to support the communities having kids, and if that's the Amish, the Mennonites, the Hutterites, traditionalist Catholics, Protestant, whatever traditionalist communities they have, evangelicals, yeah, and any community that's traditional, having tons of kids, Mormon, whatever the community is. I don't know what to say. Just you got to support the few communities still having tons of kids. That's number one, and two, try and get the other 90% of the population to do their part as well. You can't leave it to the 10% of the very conservative parts of the population, or else everyone will end up very conservative or born to very conservative parents, because while they're having like 5-10 kids, liberals, communists, progressives just aren't having any kids at all because they don't care about the family. And it's kind of like, okay, whatever makes you happy. Well, conservatives don't care about that. The conservatives care about, if there's anything about the conservative ideology, it is a pro-family ideology, which is one of its main axioms, if there is one. Yeah.
This is bad, but what will happen to South Korean society and culture may be worse. Societal and cultural collapse. Speculating on how societies will develop is extra hard, but there are a few pretty unavoidable trends. Today, already about 20% of Koreans live alone. Also, 20% report having no close friends or relatives. By 2060, 50% of South Koreans aged 70 will have no siblings, and 30% will have no children. Young adults between 25 and 35 will only make up 5% of the population, and typically have no siblings at all. This leaves the elderly with almost no close family, and young adults with little family and few potential friends, especially outside of big...
But isn't that a depressing sight, where, you're kind of the end of your life, you're living in a home, you've got no family, you've got no friends, nobody cares about you because there was no next generation to your family, or it's not big enough or closely knit enough for you to. So yeah, a lot of people at the moment. It's kind of depressing. They are the end of their lines, which is the end of their family line. Your family line has gone back to, time immemorial. And it's just the last of the generation. It's crazy. So within one lifetime, South Korea collapses. It's crazy. And South Korea is such an amazing country, and it'll be a shame to see it get hollowed out, not really stand for anything, and then go through demographic collapse. No one's having kids, and this is just the ultimate nihilistic society. This is the end point of nihilistic, neoliberal, neoconservative society. And
big cities, a loneliness epidemic of epic proportions is all but guaranteed. On top of that, South Korean culture will probably experience a huge decline. In 2000, there were 17.5 million South Koreans between 25 and 45, and they made up 37% of the population. This was the generation that brought us K-pop, K-drama, K-food, and many other trends that spread around the world. In 2060, there will be just 5.6 million people in that age group, and there'll only be 16% of the population. Many cultural traditions are already struggling because the older generations are having trouble finding young people to...
Yeah, just think about it. All this K-pop and all this youth-oriented music will just die because there'll be no one to listen to it anymore. I don't even know what to say to that.
Pass them on to. As young people disappear, many traditions will die out. Without young people, the soul of South Korean culture will shrink and wither away. And on a personal level, what kind of experience will it be growing up in 2060? What will youth culture be like in a country of seniors, where many universities, schools, and kindergartens are abandoned as there are no longer children to fill them with life? What kind of job prospects will they face, and what will politics look like? If young people don't want to remain alone, they'll concentrate in Seoul or a few other big cities, or worse for South Korea, emigrate to other countries.
Yeah, but that's one of the main questions I think they've skipped over a little bit, is what will the politics be like? And, if you're one worker and outnumbered by 2 retired people, no offense, but if you're a political party and you wish to get elected, you're not going to appeal to the one worker over the 2 pensioners. Firstly, pensioners on average have a higher turnout. So, I don't know, you're just going to get outvoted, and pensioners are going to want more and more and higher pensions, and the workers are going to be overworked, and what should have been done with 7 workers now has to be done with 1. It has to be done because there's no workers to go around anymore. It is the death of South Korea. I hate to be the generation that sees it, but It's the world we live in, and this will be happening to every other country, South Korea, then Japan, which is its own story.
Rural areas will decline, and most smaller cities will turn into ghost towns. We're already seeing this in Japan, which has almost 10 million abandoned houses.
Oh my god, I was just mentioning this. Yeah, ghost towns, ghost cities. It's slow. You don't notice it straight away, but it does happen. And once it's happened, see, the problem is once these villages and small towns and even medium and big towns that have been there since Japan's founding, once they're gone, or once they've hit a certain threshold, once you lose a town like that and it becomes a ghost town, it's hard to get it back. It's gone through its golden age, it went through its decline phase, and now it's in its death phase. Jeez. I don't envy their situation. I do not envy this generation of South Korean. You know, I was once told by somebody about the pension system, and I said, who do you think will get a pension? And he said, there's a rule of thumb. But, you know, he's much more smart than me when it comes to this type of thing. And he said, there's a rule of thumb. If you were born the last century, you'll probably get a pension. If you were born this century, you probably won't. Okay. Well, I do not envy the Zoomers or the Generation Alpha or the Generation Beta that's coming after them. They're growing up in a shovelly. I don't know. It's just a die. Yeah, you're living in a dying country, in a dying civilization, in a dying town. Just everywhere is depressing. Everywhere is like this, or everywhere is going to be like this. There's a cultural lag, as in, you don't notice it straight away, but it sometimes takes 30 to 50 years for a town or city. Just think about it. Some of these towns have been there for thousands of years, and they die within 50 years, or 30 years, or even 10, depending on how quick and the next generation goes, well, there's nothing for me here, so I'm going to go and move in the extreme density city because it's the only place with economic life. So it just becomes this perpetual cycle of death and decay and rot. And it's like walking through the end of the Roman civilization, and you look at all these great monuments that from the Roman Empire, from the Roman Republic days, from the Roman Kingdom, and it was like, and even ancient Athens, and you say, blimey, this used to be a great civilization once. It's like living in the Dark Ages. We're not quite there yet. We're kind of in the decline of the Roman era. I think we're kind of in the last of the Romans type era. Like there's these people whom, like me, for example, I'm from a country that, was once a superpower, and I remember speaking to my great grandmother, and I will be the last generation to speak to people where the Empire days were within living memory. Now, I'm not saying whether the Empire was good or bad; it's just history now. But it gets to a point where it's like, we were once the superpower ones, but we're not anymore. And my great grandmother certainly remembered it. She remembered us at our peak, and then my granddad, kind of remembers it. My mum, it's kind of there. It's at the back of the mind. And my generation, the millennial generation, kind of remembers like Hong Kong being sold off. We could still talk to people even when I was growing up. My great grandmother, everybody I would have known would have been born in the Empire days, or the death of the Empire days. So it's kind of weird. So I think we're in this post-decline phase at the moment. The post-Cold War era is, funny enough, being defined by death, decay, collapse. Just it is got to be the most nihilistic time. I've got to say that the new generation are not going to have a great time, and this is the world we've left them with. And I'm not sure where it began, but so 1960 onwards seems to be the death of humanity, or at least the decline of humanity. But we're not through the process yet. But even if society's fertility rate kind of bottoms out at 0.5, 0.7, it can't bottom out there. That is the death of humanity. And then it'll eventually reach the inverted pyramid, and then they used to say once your country reaches the inverted pyramid, Eric Kaufman seems to think there'll be a bottleneck where all these religious people have kids, and then it'll just start expanding again. Some people are less optimistic, like this video, which says it's already over. It cannot recover.
Houses in rural areas. Large parts of South Korea will simply vanish and be reclaimed by nature. Last but not least, South and North Korea are technically at war, and they could very well still be in 2060. Will South Korea still be able to afford to have its young men do 18 months of mandatory military service? Today, 5% of men of combat age are enrolled in the military. In 2060, it would have to be 15% just to match today's numbers. Okay, wait, this is all a bit much. Is there no way back? Why, there really is no way back. The problem with the democratic freight train is that once it hits, things become irreversible. Let's say fertility in South Korea magically triples to the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman and stays there. In 2060, it will be an inverted pyramid on top of a barrel. And there would still be only 1.5 people of working age per senior over 65. Even in the best made-up scenario, triples to the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman and stays there. In 2060, it will be an inverted pyramid.
Why would it be an inverted pyramid if it's at replacement level?
On top of a barrel. And there would still be only 1.5 people of working age per senior over 65. Even in the best made-up scenario, South Korea has to pass through an unavoidable bottleneck before it will recover. But there is also a kernel of hope here. Yes, the situation is grim, but at least in the long term, recovery is possible if South Korea enacts rapid and societal changes that make its population want to have kids again. In 2024, births rose for the first time in 9 years, 3% more than in 2023. But for that to continue, South Korea needs to face the music and ask how they got to this point. How could it get that bad? In general, as societies get richer, more educated, and child mortality plummets, people decide to have fewer kids. What makes South Korea special is that it's somehow supercharging all of these trends. South Korea lifted itself out of poverty in record time, but in doing so, it developed a unique kind of workaholism and extreme competitiveness. Although the work week is 40 hours and the legal maximum is 52 per week, unpaid overtime is normal for many, and the government even proposed to raise legal work time to 69 hours per week. Despite this, South Korea has relatively low wages and a high cost of living. Real estate in big cities is out of reach for most people. The cost of education is extremely high, since families have to pay for private lessons if they want to send their kids to a high-tier college. All of this while South Korea spends less on family benefits than most other rich countries. Old-fashioned cultural norms make matters even worse. Marriage is all but mandatory if a couple wants to start a family. In 2023, only 4.7% of babies were born to unmarried women. Out of all developed countries, South Korean men do just about the least share of housework and childcare within their families. This leaves women with a disproportionate. Old-fashioned cultural norms make matters even worse. Marriage is all but mandatory if a couple wants to start a family. In 2023, only 4.7%.
And the extreme workaholism of South Korea has kind of killed their society, and the fact that it's happened within, less than 2 generations. By generation, I mean every 25 years. But to be honest, it's happening so quickly, you could just use the kind of out of the West kind of use it, boomer, millennial, Gen X, Zoomer, etc. So every generation is kind of defined by every 12, 15 years or whatever.
7% of babies were born to unmarried women. Out of all developed countries, South Korean men do just about the least share of housework and childcare within their families. This leaves women with a disproportionate amount of work if they want to keep their jobs after a pregnancy, while many men are overwhelmed by the societal expectation to be the main breadwinner and have successful careers. Starting a family or not is a personal decision, and most South Koreans are deciding against it. The bottom line is that South Korea has created a culture that leads to very few kids. Conclusion. Demographic collapse is not an abstract thing in the future, it's happening right now. And it's not just South Korea. In 2023, China had a fertility rate of 1, Italy and Spain 1.2, Germany 1.4, the UK 1.6, and the US 1.6, which sounds so...
Italy's going through its own kind of crisis. I know China is. UK and the United States are a bit different for various reasons, but yeah, it's not great. I think even the United States has been below replacement level for about 40 years at this point, so that's going to catch up with them eventually. It's going to catch up with us as well, so not good for the Anglo-American world, the English-speaking West.
So much better, doesn't it? Well, after 4 generations, a fertility rate of 1.6 means 60% fewer new people. A fertility rate of 1.2 means 87% fewer people. And fertility rates are a culture that leads to very few kids. Conclusion. Demographic collapse is not an abstract thing in the future, it's happening right now. And it's not just South Korea. In 2023, China had a fertility rate of 1, Italy and Spain 1.2, Germany 1.4, the UK 1.6, and the US 1.6, which sounds so much better, doesn't it? Well, after 4 generations, a fertility rate of 1.6 means 60% fewer new...
Same issue, isn't it? It's like... within one lifetime, your great-grandkids, which you might very well meet, will be born into a country with 60% fewer people. Yeah, so even 1.6 is not good enough. And the United States is still declining. Every single state, even the hyper-conservative ones. But then again, as parts of the South are beginning to urbanize, these urban centers are very liberal, as they used to say in America. There's no such thing as... blue states, just blue cities. But blue cities are... I mean, if you look at DC, I think that's below 1 at the moment. Puerto Rico, I think, is 0.7. So it's just a nightmare. It's not good at all.
People. A fertility rate of 1.2 means 87% fewer people. And fertility rates are still falling.
1.2 is 87%. Is that Is that right?
60% fewer new people. A fertility rate of 1.2 means 87% fewer people.
That is crazy within 4 generations. So this here is the number one conservative issue. Elon Musk has talked about it. JD Vance has talked about it. Honestly, at this point, just being a conservative just means being pro-human. It just means, do you wish to continue humanity, yes or no? That's it at this point. And, you know, we're kind of in a culture and and a worldwide acceptance of the idea that, you know what, maybe it would be better without humanity because, you know, people breathe and they let out carbon dioxide and we have overpopulated the planet and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I know there's green issues against it, there's communist issues against it, there's liberal issues against it. Even moderate conservatives are kind of like on the fence about. So the only people you're going to have left are like these very conservative people who are still having kids and still getting on with it.
And fertility rates are still falling with no sign of stabilisation or recovery. The weirdest thing about all of this is that almost nobody involved in the public discourse has truly grasped the gravity of the situation. The last century was utterly dominated by overpopulation narratives, and people who say that we need more kids seem weird. And if you do the maths, the future just...
Yeah, that also didn't help, where people were talking about overpopulation, but now people are starting to realise, oh wait, our problem might not be overpopulation or kind of a stagnating population, it might be underpopulation. And demographic collapse within, you know, a very short space of time, as South Korea, Japan, China are very concerned about it. And they're going through their solutions probably wouldn't be Western solutions, but, you know, they're trying to create a culture where men and women wish to have kids and trying to stamp out feminist causes and etc. using you know, kind of a point system, which I think that's just inevitably where the situation's going to go, and China's just trying to, you know, find a solution that works for them, but even that's not working. So, and because it's not working, they've got to push it harder and harder and harder, and as demographic collapse sets in, China's not going to become more liberal about it. They're going to become more, you know, use more authoritarian means and may even get a bit creative, darkly creative about what they may or may not do or what they may wish to consider, the more desperate the situation might become. So, yeah, at this point, they might just make it compulsory. Women don't work. They only have kids, that type of thing. Point system. You're only rewarded in China, better places to live, etc. if you have X amount of kids or do X amount for the party or whatever. I don't know. But the social credit score over there is a real thing. And yeah, it's just interesting to see what their solution is versus what ours is. And at the moment, I think our solution is just kind of give money, change the culture a little bit, give a bit more money to people who want to have kids, and I don't know, just hopefully that'll work. But at some point, I think, I don't know, I think you're kind of opening up a doorway for, I don't know, I think there's many different futures the world can go down, and most of them are dystopian. Only a few of them are actually ones where you'd probably want to live. And, you know, we may have to, choices might be made where, you know, they're not in the best interests of people whom would have lived in the past, in this kind of era that we're currently living in. But, you know, do you wish to continue humanity or don't you? And I think that's all it's coming down to at the moment. And if the answer is yes, then you've got to find solutions and you've got to work out what those solutions should be. And 90% of the solutions probably aren't working. So you just got to keep going, you know, support subcultures, new or old, that wish to have kids, continue and can do it intergenerationally. It's no good doing it for 1 or 2 generations and collapsing on the third. You've got to continue it.
Seems to be too insane.
And you've also got to make sure it's in enough quantity and quality that, I don't know, so you can have a high productivity. If you're going to have a smaller population with a smaller work size, you need higher productivity, which means a higher educated workforce, etc. So,
to be true, like it's hard to believe. None of this has ever happened before. So low birth rates are mostly discussed in the context of worker shortages, not as the...
And he's absolutely right. There is no precedent for what's occurring. It just seems absolutely madness what's going on. But, we're living in the time we're living in. This bright utopian time where everything's collapsed.
Existential threat to our societies, cultures, wealth, and our way of life that they are. If we don't take it seriously very soon and change the DNA of our modern societies in a way that encourages young people to start having children again, then the rest of the century will be pretty grim for those of us who will live through it. The demographic freight train stops for nobody. We finally need to realise that it's hurtling down the tracks right at us. Multi-layered issues like demographic change are hard to break through in our current media landscape and easy to miss out on. This is why we rely on Ground News, a long-time sponsor and ally in helping find real stories of importance amongst the jumble of information.
And there you are. He doesn't end on anything. He just kind of says, yep, South Korea's over and there's not much we can do. So, what lessons can we learn from South Korea? At this point in time, we can only kind of use South Korea and Japan as a warning about what will happen to us, because it's already happening. So, if you look at Puerto Rico's demographic model, it looks awful. By that I mean just the age distribution ratio is not optimal. So, yeah, living through tough times, dreadful times. This is the number one issue. This can't be ignored. Everything else kind of comes secondary. So, I think China, South Korea, Japan, and Russia are already losing population. Every single Western country, I think, is already going to be losing population within, say, the next 20 years. So everywhere will be on decline. So that's something to look forward to. All right, yeah. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and leave a comment. What do you think about this? Do you think it's going to be a disaster for the West or humanity as a whole, or is there any solution? Is it already too late? I'll be interested to hear your thoughts, and yeah, I'll catch you on the next video.